post this session, a lot of doubts you might get. And there are already videos that are posted offline that you can watch on Instagram and learn and clarify your doubts once you go home and start practicing this. So there are just a handful of us today. So my gift or my happiness would be if all of you go back home and start composting. That would be an achievement or success for me out of this session. Okay, so let's get started with this today. So what is composting? Any of you are already doing it, or this is your first time?
Yeah.
Already doing it? Okay, great. So some of you are already starting, somewhere there, somewhere we fail and we succeed, right? So why do we need to do composting? Let's start with the intro part. So we have a lot of dry waste. You will be seeing the dry waste collection center post this session. We'll take you around there. So there are different types of waste, right? Broadly putting the waste that we humans generate, it's wet waste and dry waste. So dry waste is something that can be recycled. It is produced by us, it is made by us, it is man-made, it is not natural. But wet waste is part of an organic matter that we do not generate ourselves. It comes from nature and it has to go back to the soil or go back to nature. That's where it belongs. If you mix these two, what we make and what nature generates, then it's a disaster. Then it results in landfills, which is nothing but loads and loads of mixed waste from our cities like us, which all of us generate together as a community and ends up in the landfill, resulting in the generation of which gas? Good. So it's methane. So it is 20x more hazardous than carbon dioxide. So worldwide, whatever we are talking about, the climate change, last 2 months back in Bangalore, when we had the peak of the summer, 50 or 42 degrees, right? So this is the first time over the last 10 or 30 years or so, we never experienced this climate change. So there is a lot of climate impact that is happening, which might directly or indirectly affect you. And this is primarily because of all these toxic gases and the pollution that we actually generate that is going and depleting the ozone layer and causing the climate change and generation of these toxic gases. So landfill is one such source where this extremely polluted and toxic gas that gets generated and it leaches into the air, not only into the air but also into the soil as well as our water bodies. So whatever wet waste that gets clogged in these landfills, right, they generate a lot of toxic liquid as well that enters the neighboring lakes, rivers. It affects the marine population. Even if it might not affect us directly, we might be staying in the heart of the city, but the people staying around these landfills, imagine the amount of toxic gases and toxicity they are actually breathing day in and day out. So something that we can do at our end as an individual, as a community, as a city is by segregating our waste. That is the very first step. Second step is composting your wet waste as much as possible. So now let's start with composting. It's a simple combination of greens and browns. It is purely, to define it in a very crisp way, it is just a well-defined mixture or balance of wet and the greens and the browns. So when we talk about greens, it is nothing but our kitchen waste. So can some of you give examples of what are the different types of kitchen waste we generate? Yeah, peels, leftover food scraps. Yes, all those are wet waste, right? Your garden cuttings, even nail, hair, all these are organic matter that can easily get composted, right? So even the flowers, the dry leaves that gets not the dry leaves, the wet garden cuttings. So the grass which we plow or we de-weed, all the weeds that we extract from our garden, all that falls into wet waste category. Now coming to dry browns. So what are the different types of browns? Yeah, so that is very much found everywhere, right? So one drawback of the dry leaves is what people find that they consider it part of the trash. That is the biggest mistake that we do and we all consider. It is actually a very, the greatest gift that nature gives us after drying, after the leaves fall and the tree gives away. Even that can be converted back into something very useful and valuable. But we think it's trash. So what happens is across the streets and all, you see that people will take away all these dry leaves and they'll start burning it. Again, it results in toxic gases getting emitted because it is plastic. All the waste gets mixed along with dry leaves, and the resource also gets wasted. So instead, this is one precious resource that we should try to save and use in our composting process. So when I take you around, there is a beautiful leaf bay that Swachhagraha team has implemented there. We'll show you how we are using the dry leaves collected from across the HSR layout. So apart from dry leaf, the second thing I want to show you is this is also a source of browns. From where does this come from? Coconut, right? So these are the particles that comes after you extract the coconut husk, the dry part of the coconut. So this is also extremely useful. This forms the browns in your compost. So you have crushed dry leaves. Why do we say that we have to crush? It's basically if the leaves are like, it depends on what tree you get it from, right? If the leaves are huge, again it gets compacted and your composting will take more time. It will get compost, but it will take more time. So if you want to fasten the process and get a better air circulation, you crush the dry leaves before adding it to your compost. Okay. So these two are mainly the parts which comes under the browns category. And this is also one more ingredient. What is this? Cow dung. So this is dry cow dung. This is browns. Or you can even use fresh cow dung slurry as an accelerator in your compost. And this is, have you seen this before? Yeah, it's eventually cocoa peat, but this is available in the market. We have solutions, we even sell them here as well or online. So this is the cocoa peat which has microbes infused in it. So this is microbial cocoa peat. So you soak this compacted brick, right? This is a cocoa peat brick. You soak this in water and then it will start expanding and give you huge quantity of such cocoa peat. So in such cases, you have the browns and you have the microbes also infused in it. So you have both the ingredients already in one brick. So where places where you don't find crushed dry leaves in cities or apartments, then you can very well go for this cocoa peat or buy the microbial cocoa peat. And you can also add, so these are the two ingredients I told, right? Browns and greens. These two have to be mixed and balanced well. But who plays the key role here to start working on these ingredients?
Microbes.
Sorry?
Organisms.
What type of organisms? Yeah. So generally we think composting is only done by earthworms, right? So that is actually called vermicomposting. There are two clear classification here. So first is aerobic composting. What I'm going to show you today is aerobic composting. There is also something called as vermicomposting. So that is done in Swachhagraha here. You can see a pit full of vermicomposting done here, which we'll be doing the activity post this session. So that is different. That is purely done by the earthworms, which consume the wet waste, the organic matter, they poop, and that gives the final vermicompost or the end product. So this is the aerobic composting, which happens due to the beneficial microorganisms. The bacteria that is present in the soil is also a very good example. So all these microorganisms which exist in like fermentation process, those are all the good bacteria. So they are going to play a key role here, and they need lot of air circulation and oxygen. So this is the key difference that kind of separates what a landfill does and what this composting bin does. So landfill happens in the present absence of oxygen. So everything is compacted together in huge mounds of waste, mixed waste, which generates methane because there is no oxygen present. Here in composting, the aerobic composting, oxygen plays a key role to make the organism survive and to create a very good, well-balanced ecosystem inside your compost bin. So the first thing you need here is the compost bin. You see here, there are holes drilled at equal distances across your bin. So you can make your own DIY bins, or you can purchase these from different organizations. We can show you the links, or it is there in the SWMRT website as well. You can purchase these or make your own bins. There are different plastic bins as well as khamba bins. So we generally recommend you don't go and buy new plastic. That is not the message here. So you can reuse your existing buckets that you have at home, drill holes and make this compost bin, or buy them as well. Or you can very well use terracotta based bins. They are also can be used as compost bin. You would have seen different vendors like Daily Dump and other vendors which actually sell the usual terracotta pots that we have. It has the same material in it. Okay. And then of course in a community composter, when we go around, we'll see there are different bins made up of steel and iron, like the mesh composters. You have cement composters. Those are all like for huge parks, gardens, communities, organizations where you have enough space and it is present on the ground. This what we are showing here is for your home composting. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So what we typically do is the accelerators. Let me complete that part. So the accelerators is nothing but your microorganisms, right? So you can even add sour buttermilk. That is one source of microbial activity or the good bacteria which is present because of the fermentation process. So you can add your sour buttermilk, or like I mentioned, if you have access to this, you can add cow dung, fresh cow dung slurry as well. That has huge amount of, after the cow and the cattle, they absorb the plant material, whatever gets fermented from their gut has enough good bacteria that comes out as a cow dung. So this is the best method that is used natively in the past by our ancestors, by the farmers, right, organically. So this is what is the main source. And if you don't have this, then definitely you can go for sour buttermilk, or you can purchase this microbial cocoa peat which has microbes infused in this already. Otherwise, you have certain remix powders also available by certain brands that have inbuilt microorganisms. You can add that. The dosa batter, like the fermented dosa batter, right? So that is also a good fermentation process like your curd. So you can just dilute that in a water. Don't pour too much water. Just you can sprinkle a little bit of that once in a while to accelerate the process and infuse more microorganisms in your compost.
Fresh dosa batter also?
The fermented one, whichever one you use, like after a week or something. Even if you have a week, you're planning to discard it, don't discard it. Instead, you can add it back in your compost. Okay, so these are the different ones. And the other key one is your previous batch of compost. For some of you who said you are already composting, you already have compost. This is enriched with a lot of microorganisms. This is full and thriving with life, the compost that you already have. So this is again a best source of microorganisms. You can add it back in your fresh batch of compost. So every time you store your old compost, you can add a handful of compost now and then in your fresh batch, which will also accelerate the composting process. So typically it takes around 45 days, 30 to 45 days. It doesn't happen like magically in a week or so. It takes its own time because various factors play a role here, right? What is the weather change? So main thing I want to say is do not keep it directly in sunlight, because in a forest floor, what typically happens? All the leaves fall in, so the soil is covered with lot of layers and layers of leaf. You have insects, you have microorganisms. So as soon as you enter forest, what kind of fragrance do you get? That fresh earthy smell, right? Or when the rain first hits your soil, the petrichor kind of smell. That is what the final compost would smell like. So it would give a fresh earthy smell. It should be a final product. Okay, so that typically shows you have replicated what happens naturally in a forest floor, and this can be added back as an accelerator in your compost very well. Okay, so let's start the process now. So as I mentioned, you can use a bin or a bucket like this with holes drilled on the sides. This is typically for the aeration, again for air circulation. Otherwise, it will clog and it will form like big chunks. And then that is why a lot of people would complain and they are scared to even start composting, because they say that it will stink. Why does it stink? Because you are sorry?
It is completely covered in
Right. Or there is wet waste more. The balance is not happening. So you are replicating the landfill here. Something like that, similar to that, right? Because that is where it stinks. It is being choked without the presence of oxygen. So that's why having holes around the compost bin is very important. So here we have drilled holes at the bottom. This is basically to release for the leachate to escape. So suppose if you add more and more wet waste, and certain fruits like watermelon, ash gourd, cucumber and all will ooze out more water as a part of wet waste, right? So for that, whenever even if you compost and add enough material also, little bit of leachate would come. So typically what we do is we place this compost bin in a plate like this. And that's why the bottom holes are needed. So that whatever leachate comes, it gets collected at the bottom plate. So this is the structure we generally recommend. And if you see, there are holes at the top also, so that there is enough air circulation. So let's start the process. So to start with, you take your compost bin first. So you're going to start the first batch, right? So let's add 2 to 3 handfuls of brown matter, either crushed dry leaves, or you can add the cocoa peat at the bottom. Okay, so you can add more browns at the bottommost layer, because as and when you add wet waste, the water will percolate through the bottom, right? So this will act as a conduction layer. It will start absorbing.
that much more.
Yeah,
Like
3 handfuls of, like you just have one layer of browns at the bottommost of your bin. Okay, And after this, assume it is day 1. You're going to start adding kitchen peels from your kitchen, right? So either the food scraps or the peels from your kitchen. So you can now start adding the second layer, which is like, even you can add flowers from your puja room, the discarded flowers, leaves and cuttings from your garden, fruit and vegetable peels. So don't start immediately adding cooked food if you're starting this for the first time, okay? Because that needs experience and that requires more of browns. So this we are showing typically for the fresh peels, the fruit or the vegetable peels that generally gets discarded and forms like almost 30 to 40% of your wet waste. Okay, so we have added one layer of wet waste now on this.
Has to be like same, the brown, the quantity of browns and greens added.
The first bottom layer, assume like you put 2 layers. That is fine, so that it absorbs more. Then you add 1 layer of this thing. Okay, so this is your wet waste, which is your second layer. Now the third layer, I am going to add browns again. So this can typically be your microbial coco peat also. It may not be just the coco peat which they sell in nurseries and gardens, which you add in your soil and potting mix. That is different from microbial coco peat because this already has the microbes infused in it. So I'll add the browns now. So every time you add your wet waste and add the browns as your second layer, make sure that the wet waste is not exposed. You cover it fully with your browns. So this will prevent the flies and insects from coming in. So when your wet waste is exposed on the top, because of the smell and the presence, it will attract more insects. Of course, if you have the lid, it would still not come, but make sure that you cover it with the layer of browns and your wet waste is not exposed. Okay?
First layer we're doing browns and then we're doing dry leaves.
First layer is browns, which can be either dry leaves or coco peat or microbial coco peat or something like this dried cow dung as well. That is your, so generally keep it as browns. So next layer will be the greens and then it is again browns. So this is nothing but sandwiching, right? You're alternating it with layers of greens and browns. That's it, as simple as that. So this day 1 is over. I've added my browns, I close the bin and I keep it in a place where there is shade. Don't expose it directly to sunlight. Don't expose it directly to rain. Structures like this, which we will show you around, this is prone to sun and rain, that is still fine. Those are for community composters. But for your home composter, compost bin where you have a small structure like this, ensure that you do not expose this directly to sunlight or to rain directly, otherwise it would leach completely, right, the water content. So this is the day 1. Now coming to day 2. So you have the next day of wet waste, right? So you already have the layer of browns. So I'm going to add back my next layer of wet waste here. So this is day 2. So the process is typically the same. It's just alternating layers and sandwiching your browns and greens one after the other.
You can still, when you are adding the next day, can we still it and add it?
Yeah, the first 2 days it's still okay. So maybe I would recommend once in a week or so, because see, that's the advantage of having holes around the compost bin, right? You have equal holes drilled around as well as on the top. So there is enough air circulation as of now. You need not start stirring every day and all. You just start sandwiching, that should be good enough. If you feel that, especially when you add your wet waste, one tip I would give is don't add big chunks. Put in a little bit more effort to chop it and then add it. There is nothing wrong in doing it. You can just dump it as it is. But if there is big chunks of watermelon, what would happen? It would again form clogs, and that is where it will stop like the oxygen from circulating equally, right? But if it was like smaller particles, then air circulation will be better and composting will be faster. So that tip you should forget. Just like how you're crushing your dry leaves, ensure while adding your big chunks of food waste or scraps, chop it a little bit to make it smaller and then put it in your compost. Okay, so day 3 is done. You have actually layered greens and browns now. So you see only the top layer now, but actually if you see in a diagrammatic form, you will actually see different or alternating layers of greens and browns. Okay, and once a week you can give it a stir. Either use a glove or your hand. It's after all your waste, right? It's not even what we are doing or picking up others. It is your waste, what you have consumed, and you know what is there in it. So you can very well use your hand or gloves, or even you can use a spatula or any instrument like the gardening tool and give it a nice stir once a week. this will ensure there is enough air circulation and oxygen that gets circulated inside the compost bin. And always keep your bin closed. So this will ensure that it doesn't attract any rodents or pests or even other insects and all. But still, even after doing so much precaution, you will see that some people, when you add more wet waste, and I think Gayatri is also very good, we have the picture, we can show you. She also experienced this. There were a lot of maggots in the bin. Okay? You also experienced, right? So most of us, when we are trying it, okay. So these are two things. So smell is because
Very small insect and white color, brown color. Too many, like thousands maybe, I don't know.
okay,
So many. And I just opened, my mom just opened and she
freaked out, like
freaked out.
obviously.
She threw the
It is obvious, right? So we think that these are some alien species or something that is very bad or ugly, and we either fear or disgust or whatever. Multiple emotions, right?
Right, but then it was right beside my, like, it was right adjacent to my bedroom, so I was just
Okay,
scared.
okay, that is even more scary. Okay, so yeah, that is very much understood and it is expected. So the key thing here is, one thing is, do not fear. It is all part of the ecosystem. So why do you like only earthworms and don't like maggots? Why the hatred towards it? They are both doing the same work, right? They are eating up your waste and they are giving up the poop and the compost, and they are giving you a final end product which is beautiful and which is organic. Then the first thing is, cut out that fear. Don't fear that there are maggots or living thing, whatever insect may be, right? The second thing, still, if you do not want it, make sure, again, for both the reasons which you mentioned, the stinking part and the maggots, there should be good distribution of greens and browns. If it's too wet, if you have only wet waste, you keep on dumping kitchen waste with no browns at all, then it would be more soggy, it would attract these insects, and then it would lay eggs. So maggots are nothing but the larvae of your soldier flies, the actual soldier flies. So they will go away. Once their cycle is complete, they eat your organic waste, they poop, and they give you the benefit of it. They'll just fly away once they grow. So they are the larvae of the black soldier fly. And that somehow has escaped in your compost bin, and they have laid the eggs. That is the first reason your maggots have started coming to life, right? So as soon as your process is done, always ensure to keep your bin nice and closed. So even if you leave it like loose for a day or two by mistake also, there are chances. They find it nice and cozy, they'll go and lay the eggs, and that's how your maggot gets generated. So make sure there is good amount of balance between your greens and browns, and keep your lid closed at all times. This will ensure that it doesn't attract these types of insects. Even after this, if it is still there, please don't worry, give it a nice stir, they will go away. It is all part, the ants and maggots, all these are part of the ecosystem. So once their work is done, their life cycle is completed, they will go away, you will get the black gold as expected. Okay? So this is the typical process, and this would typically take around 30 to 45 days, but it depends upon the environment or the ambience where this is done, right? So if there is not enough air circulation, if there are not enough microorganisms or added to this, then the process would slow down. It would take 45 days, it would take 60 days if there is no balance. So it comes with practice. Once you start, please do not give up. Even if you fail, even I have failed, I am no expert even now. So even I have failed, and then I have learned from it. So do not give up. See where you learn from your mistakes. So if there is a lot of, like where you said stinking, right? Try adding more and more of browns that day. Don't add wet waste for a day or two. Start adding browns and mix it. Given a 2 or 3 days, it will come back to its original form in no time. You don't have to dump it or throw away just because it has maggots.